Hello and welcome to Step Up Nigeria's podcast. Our podcast is an initiative built to create awareness of governance issues that highlight the cost of corruption and its impact on service delivery. Our podcast also hopes to build a society with people of integrity and provide solutions to service delivery challenges faced by everyday Nigerians. On this special podcast episode, we would be bringing you an interesting discussion continuing our COVID-19 and corruption series. And in this podcast, we'll be discussing how is data-driven journalism helping to expose corruption during COVID-19. And to discuss this with us today, we have our Executive Director, Onyi Ough, and a special guest from Dataphyte who would like to introduce himself, please.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Olufemi. I'm the founder of Dataphyte and the team lead for data access and other programs.
Thank you very much for that, Joshua. So we'd like to go straight into the conversation. So why do you think Dataphyte was necessary? What was the need to establish an organization like Dataphyte?
First, the access to data in Nigeria in the larger, freedom of information space was challenged as a whole for civil society, for media, and even well-meaning policymakers who wanted to use data to plan or to assess or to project for the future. And that was first the need, what prompted establishing Dataphyte to respond to that lack of data or access to data. The other is, even when the data is available, there are a lot of civil society that were providing data. You had the Premium Times, Center for Investigative Journalism, which is Udemy platform, Budget Ad Tracker, Follow the Money by Connected Development. And then you wonder, what kind of intelligence, insights are citizens getting from this data? Nothing more than just, this, do you know? And we thought, why don't we take this data, weaponize it for good, and then put it in the hands of citizens and also policymakers. So that when you say things like, we've spent 10 trillion naira, for instance, on subsidy, and citizens feel like, you've done so well. And then the question is, was that the best way you could have used that money? Couldn't you have used it to build schools? Couldn't you have used it to build, to construct hospitals? Wouldn't you have used it to give a job, rather than putting it in the hands of people who have cars and can always buy the fuel at a lesser rate? So you're more or less talking about redistribution of government resources or national wealth or resources. So those kind of need to provide more insight and intelligence was another reason for Dataphyte. And also across development, especially, you see that even the right kind of data isn't available there, and the ones that you have are outdated. I'll give you another example. The latest national Nigeria Demography and Health Survey is 2018 data. Every other 5 years is when you have this data produced by the National Bureau of Statistics. That means you have 5 years to make decisions for issues such as access to health, gender, and all of those kind of things. And we thought we could also, within that value chain, provide access to, data collection that can be used, on the go, either at midpoint, end point, or even the baseline point of decision making by all stakeholders.
Thank you very much for that introduction as well, and then explaining to us why data is so important in this fight that we are honestly going into. So a lot of your work, like you've explained, using data to highlight various governance issues, talking about putting this data in the hands of media, policymakers, citizens, and the likes. So after this data has been given to those who disseminate it further, how can open data help to ensure good governance?
I like you to see data like, a tool to balance governance as it is. So it helps to reconfigure, the relationship between citizens and the state. The demand and supply of information, the demand and supply of accountability is what, open data helps to provide. So it moves, government from just being information gatekeepers or publishers, and, aligns that with citizens' ability to interpret and use that data. And then from that, you're able to have good governance, equitable and more, what you can say, just society. And how does it do that? First, it helps citizens to better understand government policies because that's, embedded in data. It also helps citizens to be able to hold government to account. It helps other social accountability agents like the media and civil society, to be able to use that same data to combat misinformation and disinformation, and also helps to enhance objectivity, especially for journalists, in that regard. So it's a transparency tool. It's a inclusive participation tool. It's government efficiency tool, as it were. And it's a good policy and development planning, instrument at large.
Thank you very much for that. Onyi, as well, what are your thoughts on the importance of data, and how do you think data can help improve governance, as well as the importance of data-driven journalism in tackling corruption?
Yeah, thank you, Farami. I think, I liked the phrase Joshua used earlier when he said he sees open data as something that balances governance. Open data, like he's mentioned, is quite a powerful tool, particularly when you take that data that is available, like what Dataphyte is doing, and to actually now make it accessible, to citizens, and also to tell stories, around that data. And I'll come to that. One of the key things open data does, which probably we're going to discuss later in this podcast, is around exposing corruption. I can give so many examples of how open data, has enabled civil society, even to some extent the media, NGOs, to expose corruption. Like, for example, PPDC, I'll give an example. They've been using procurement data to highlight various issues. I know they've used procurement data to highlight issues around primary healthcare facilities not being well equipped. Take the NEITI audit reports, which we receive. It's there. So what is useful, having that data open, it now makes it easy for people like Joshua, in Dataphyte, and the rest of and other data analysts to now take that data and make it meaningful for citizens. So open data is very useful in exposing corruption. It's very useful in highlighting red flags, weak service delivery points. It's really, it's so powerful that I can't, it's really a powerful tool, but it's only more powerful when it's broken down. So the data in itself, in Nigeria, I was reflecting the other day, we think, actually, Nigerian government is quite open to some extent, in the sense that we actually have so many open platforms at the moment. And I just realized that I think the problem is not just that they're not there. I went to the Open Treasury portal, and I was just clicking and just looking at numbers, and I think I just closed the portal. I didn't even know where to start from. And if you're the kind of person that is like, a little bit nervous about, numbers, graphs, oh my God, you're already put off. So this is where the work that Dataphyte, I think, does, which is what drew me to Dataphyte as well. I think it's quite nice to have that kind of support, around making data meaningful. It's very important. So I think these are just some of the examples: exposing corruption, identifying weak service delivery points, bridging the gap between government and citizens. Using that is a good tool. It's for constructive engagement. That's what open data does. When that data is there, we can begin to ask questions. You ask questions based on evidence. There's a platform, there's something we are beginning to have a bargaining, power over. But when we don't have that data, where do you even start? Do you get what I mean? So this is what open data does. Open data really, really is quite a constructive tool that can really help in strengthening good governance.
Thank you very much, Onyi. And you had started to talk about it already. And Josh, I would like if you can even give more specific examples on how data-driven journalism has helped in the fight against corruption, and how you think it can help and will continue to help going forward.
All right. So I said I'll start with my past life, which is when I was still with the Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism. And if you remember the kind of reporting that we did with Panama Papers and Paradise Papers, you can begin to see the power of data journalism, and the kind of impact it can create. Because all we had was just a data dump from a whistleblower. And this data dump, when we use the tools of data journalism and investigative journalism, you had, presidents, prime ministers, in different places resigning because accountability stared them in the face and, kind of whipped them, swept them off their feet. So that's one way. And another thing that data journalism is able to do is it kind of restrain, a journalist from, deviating from objectivity. Because, we all have our biases. We all have different ways that they can find their way into our practice and profession. But data helps you to stay on course because, one, the information is right there. You're just analyzing and interpreting it. Of course, you can misinterpret, but that gives you one guide to what you're doing. Another thing that data journalism does is it gives you evidence. It's evidence-based reporting. It's not hearsay. It's not no source can come back and say, I'm denying what I said before, or I didn't mean what I said before. Data is the source, and data you can always go back to, and that level of credibility. But more importantly is that it's a tool for anti-corruption. And I want you to see data journalism, the product of data journalism in the hand of an anti-corruption agency such as ICPC, EFCC, SCUMOL, and the other ones, because after whatever you have done with data journalism becomes evidence that they themselves can use to prosecute or to sanction anyone. That level of, that power that it has. And above board, it advances development, democratic governance. It becomes a tool to engage citizens. It empowers citizens to be able to demand accountability, and there's this other role that it's able to play, even though it's still aspirational in Nigeria. And that role is that it has a capacity for early warning and is able to predict or forecast the future. And we experimented it in, during the COVID-19 pandemic. When it got to Nigeria, people they wanted information about how much it will spread. What's the rate of spread? Where will it get to? And what did we do? We just deployed a predictive tool, and we said, okay, by May ending, the number will have gone beyond 10,000, or it will have reached 10,000. And here we were in May, and that prediction was true. So it means that if you had a government that was serious, that kind of predictive tool that journalism had deployed was something for them to react to say, okay, if these guys are saying we should be looking out for 10,000, that means we should be preparing for 10,000. And there were many other things that you could use data journalism to do, like you could look at demographic spread. You could look at different things and then deploy that to begin to give early warning and to begin to signal what is possible and what's not possible, and so much more that you can do with data journalism and governance.
Yes, thank you very much, Joshua. So I was saying over to you, Onyi. Any more specific examples that you can give on how data-driven journalism can help to tackle the corruption in Nigeria?
Thank you. Joshua mentioned referring to Premium Times as a perfect example. They've done lots of investigative stories which has involved the use of data. But I think more specific, more generally, I would just want to kind of emphasize what Joshua had said. What I like about data-driven journalism, why this is very important around particularly fighting corruption, is just that approach of using storytelling, right? To tell, using data to tell stories, which is backed with evidence. So it's one thing to tell stories around an issue, but actually, having using data to tell that story. So meaning that story is actually backed with evidence, makes it more powerful. So it can be very useful around even like money laundering issues. It's very useful around procurement issues. This data-driven journalism, like, for example, what we're going to discuss later today around emergency procurement. We can see how data-driven journalism, even, from what Dataphyte does, has enabled or highlighted a very, very important red flag around COVID-19 procurement. So this is just showing the potential. I'm using that because that's a very recent example, and it's just showing the potential that data-driven journalism can have. or has on exposing corruption or exposing red flags that indicate some kind of foul play. So I think data-driven journalism definitely is something to watch out for, and I think should be done more and by so many media organizations. And I think Dataphyte, even though they're not a media organization, but they're using their approaches you could call data-driven journalism, because what they're doing is telling news stories from the data around various issues. And I'm hoping that they would also support other media organizations, to produce more of this kind of stories, using data to tell stories. I think it's a beautiful thing, and to really expose a lot, because you're doing that with evidence, backed with evidence.
Thank you very much, Onyi, and thank you very much, Joshua. So we move to the main gist of our discussion today. So Dataphyte has recently published a report highlighting some red flags with the emergency procurement of goods and services during the COVID-19 pandemic. So can you please tell us a bit more about your findings from that report and some of its implications?
Right. So one of the things that we found out from the investigation was that not all the MDAs that are supposed to be reporting at the moment are reporting. So I think at the moment you have just about 4 to 5 agencies that are reporting. So you have the Federal Ministry of Health, but just one agency under that ministry is reporting, which is the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. You have the Federal Ministry of Environment. You have the NCDC. Yes, the National Center for Disease Control, and then you have the NSCDC, which is another law enforcement agency under the Ministry of Interior. Now you look at all the people that are affected by these issues, and then you ask the questions: where are the other ones? For instance, Ministry of Aviation, transportation. I mean, under the aviation sector. They are nowhere to be found. Other agencies that are also involved, such as the FRSC, the police, and other ones that have become frontline agents in these issues. You don't have information about them. So that's the first thing. But for the 5 MDAs that have actually published their data, we noticed a lot of discrepancies, or what I would say violation or red flag in terms of what you have in the procurement, emergency procurement procedure of the BPP. So because COVID-19 it's an emergency issue and a health emergency issue, the regular Bureau Procurement Act has been relaxed to ensure that people can move around things easily. And one of the things that it's ensured is that you don't need to have pretty much the bidding process. You probably don't need a budget planning document. All you need to do is approach contractors and ensure that these contractors are compliant with the federal contractors requirements, such as you have your CSC registered, your FRS payment certificate is up to date, your NSITF, and other things like that are in place. So we realized that for almost all the 5 MDAs, they had contractors who have not met this requirement. Another thing is also the cost inflation in what they're doing. Some of even the projects are untraced. You can't trace them and they are unverified. But I'll give you an instance. There was a 1 million naira ID card pass, a location purchase of ID card pass, and and for production of 500 units of ID cards. So you're wondering, is an ID card about 20,000 naira, or how much is it to or 2,000 naira to buy an ID card? So you have issues like that. You have also things that like procurement of liquid soap for 40 million naira and customized fabric face mask, for that amount of money. So there are basic challenges like that. And some of these contractors, I think there was a point where we realized that one of them has actually been marked as a defaulting contractors, which means it's already on the defaulters list. And that means you shouldn't be doing business with such an organization. There are also instances, even when they have published this data, that the breakdown of the purchases and proper descriptions were missing. And these are already red flags, and avenue for corruption, as it were. We reached out to one of the contractors, and I think they were saying, one of the agencies, and they said, we had to do everything in a hurry, and we just went with anyone who had it in their store. And that means no main measure was put in place, and so much more that we think. But overall, I think that the emergency, state is giving room for these NDAs to violate the act, and at some point, accountability, needs to come to fall, or you need to hold them to account in one way or the other and sanction them so that others can learn. But more importantly, there are bigger transactions that are being done by other MDAs that we don't even have them published at the moment, and that's another level of advocacy that you need civil society and the media to begin to point out.
Thank you so much for that. That was quite enlightening, and it's sad to say that there are so many discrepancies that are existing. It will be interesting to see what all the findings will bring post-COVID when we're looking back at how much was spent, and that would be good to see as well. So, Onyi, any thoughts? And also, based on what Joshua just explained about, emergency procurement and things like that, what recommendations would you suggest based on some of these red flags that have been identified?
Thank you, Farami. So when I saw Dataphyte's report earlier today, actually it was like, wow, this is what we've been discussing since the COVID-19 pandemic, the emergency procurement risk, what are the corruption risks during COVID-19? And then just seeing almost like it kind of validated what we've been scared of. And which is why, I said, no, Joshua, we need to talk about this. I think this is, quite a very relevant and timely report. So, first of all, is this a surprise? No, it's not a surprise. I'm on the point. I'm of the view that when we've been discussing COVID-19 and corruption risk, and I always argue that yes, there are going to be some emerging corruption risks during pandemics. So pandemics, because of the emergency procurement thing and the pressure to get things quickly in order to save lives. However, in the case of Nigeria, I would say this is something. It's just more like, would I call it a worse situation, or just makes it easier for them? This is what we see every time. The procurement rules. If you look at the audit reports, have they flouted procurement rules like anything you can think of? I don't know how many MDAs really follow appropriate procurement rules. We see this thing. So what the risk with COVID-19, the emergency response. Management of funds during this period is just that, like Joshua said, it just makes it worse because then they have more loopholes as well to, probably give an excuse on why XYZ happened. So it's not a surprise. It's just like building up on what we're already experiencing, around MDAs, violating procurement rules, contract being awarded to friends and family. These are just the issues Step Up Nigeria keeps on talking. This is the social norm. These are the normal practices that we see. This is, from January to December every year for my MDs. What is happening is just that the pandemic is just, will I call it, made it slightly worse? I won't even say it's because things even happen. It's made it slightly worse. But the good thing is that civil society has been quite prepared, this time around. And I think with the social media and somehow will I call it as the positive thing of the lockdown, people, everybody being on the internet, there's been so much questions from beginning of March or even early February when it came into Nigeria. Oh, these funds, how are we going to manage? Tell us who is donating money. So there's lots of questions. And I was even surprised that we actually, Dataphyte, brought it to my attention from that report that there's actually a list of donors on the Open Treasury portal. So the information is actually out there. So it's not a surprising development, but it's interesting that, what I like is that the data is, enabling us to actually begin this, at least have evidence to actually now begin to ask questions. Like Joshua said, first of all, why the other MDAs that haven't submitted, anything. And this is, like I said, this is also typical because for the audit report, we know many MDAs do not even submit audit reports. So this is just showing you like the rot already in the system that is just, manifesting or is of a greater concern because to manage the COVID-19 response, we need to really have corruption. See hand sanitizers, how much does it really cost? Or What was the other one Joshua talked about? That was, I can't remember what it was again, but just those little things and costing so much, amount of money when there's so many poor communities with no access to any healthcare facilities. What I'll be interested to find out as well, I don't know if Dataphyte has looked into this, even the contracts for the isolation centers. How was, what was the process? Because we don't even know, we just know people were building isolation centers or contracts have been given for people to build quarantine centers. What's the story behind that? Who are the contractors? When was it, because those are big, huge projects, and those are the questions that I think civil society should keep on asking. And I will be interested to see the process for the contract for those things. But so it's not a surprise at all. In terms of recommendations, it's the same. I would say the recommendations we'll be making around procurement reforms generally, around the need. First of all, I don't know, Joshua can correct me. I'm not too sure if there are clear guidelines around emergency procurement in Nigeria. I'm not sure. Do we have clear guidelines that are transparent, on what to do to ensure transparency and accountability? So if we already have that, then that's good. That's the first step. Then secondly, we need to have a proper audit by the Office of the Auditor General, a performance audit on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think in doing that audit, it would be good for the Office of the Auditor General to consider partnering with civil society. So we have a kind of like a citizen participatory audit, so that because so we have a holistic approach to this audit, because civil society are already doing some form of audit and they're seeing things. So whatever they are feeding into, if there's a way they can take that data and evidence as well and impute into what they're doing, I think that will be recommended, and really do a full-fledged report and not something that comes out 10 years after, because then it will be useless. We want, a performance audits that would come in, at least, soon enough that will be reasonable for people to ask questions and, take whatever measures that needs to be taken. And I think that also, if red flags are being, I don't know the role, I don't know how anti-corruption agencies as well would work in, in this kind of setting. But like in an ideal world with some of the issues that Dataphyte has highlighted or alleged, I mean, it needs to be investigated. I think proper investigation should be conducted around some of this process. We need to bring in the anti-corruption agencies here as well. Let them just conduct, nobody's accusing anybody of anything, that you're innocent until proven guilty, but some red flags have been identified, analyzing the open portal that we have and other sources of evidence that Dataphyte has used to see that, there's an issue. There's some contracts that seem inflated. I think I want us to move beyond just the talk and let's move more to the work. So when this Dataphyte has highlighted this, how can we move from this posing these red flags to actually someone, another body or another group now taking that responsibility of investigating and verifying and ensuring that, okay, what happened here? Okay, could it have been a mistake? Could it have been, do you get what I mean? And then I think that would be a useful next step. So in summary, I would say, one, an audit, performance audits on the response of the COVID-19 on the funds that have been allocated for COVID-19 response, and that audit they should consider doing that in collaboration with civil society working, in the audit space. And then secondly, I would say that the anti-corruption agencies, if there's a way Dataphyte and the rest of them who have exposed this should also pass this information to the anti-corruption agencies, assuming they haven't seen it, and see if they can take up, investigate this further as well. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you very much, Onyi. So Joshua, for final comments, based on the findings of the report and all that you've seen and the comments you've made as well, what are some of your recommendations for government, citizens, civil society? What recommendations do you have for improvement that would ensure that some of the errors that you've identified don't continue to occur?
Okay. I'll start with the most important office in the nation, and that's the Office of the Citizens. I think citizens need to take advantage of these open government data portals, such as the Cocoa data, such as the Open Treasury portal, and in any simple way possible, begin to demand accountability. Just while we were talking, I'll give you an example. I just saw on NCDC, list of things that they purchased, that they spent 24 million constructing gatehouse and perimeter fence for the treatment and isolation center in Abuja. I don't know what perimeter fence you're building with 24 million naira. And that's the kind of question that any other, citizen can ask and say, seriously, is it a whole building you are building, or just, and this conversation can start from there. The same thing with journalists. They need to always take advantage of this, especially because, the evidence is right in front of them. You don't need any special whistleblower. You don't need anybody dropping anything at your door or in your email. Everything is already here for you to take advantage of. And the same thing with civil society. I think it's high time the civil society partner more, like Onyi said, with anti-corruption agencies and even with the media. Some media organizations don't have the capacity to, even download this document and take it into another platform. They can just look at it here and then. So there's need for training capacity. And I think that development community also, I know that there's been a lot of work that they've done, because we had a webinar with their development partners recently, and they said that they reached out to all their grantees to say, you can take some of your grants to do your COVID-19 work. I think they should also start to point people in the direction of all this open data portal and say, what level of auditing, what level of accountability are you guys into? And at large also, government has gone a long way to provide this platform. I don't think that should become an excuse not to do every other anti-corruption and accountability work that it is meant to do. And we should also they should also not use this as a reason, not to, respond to freedom of information requests that people are giving them, because this is not exhaustive. There are other agencies, like I mentioned, that have not published here, and when they are reached out to, they should be, open enough, to provide that information. There's no need to fight. If the government says anti-corruption is one of its, anchor programs for this administration, I think that they should go all the length with that, as it were.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you for all the insight and for breaking down parts of this report for us. And thank you so much for joining us. Before we end the podcast quickly, can you please point our listeners into the direction of how can they follow Dataphyte, your activities on social media? Do you have a website, or is there a portal you want to point our listeners to as well?
Right. Thank you so much. So just as the name is, if you just type dataphyte.com, you'll be able to see a number of our reports. Our data journalism work, DATAPHYTE. It's not the fight. People kind of think it's the punching, and so it's not FYGHT. It is PHYTE. So dataphyte.com, and we're on Twitter with the same handle at Dataphyte. On Facebook, the same thing. LinkedIn, you can use that to find us. I think the only one that has a suffix is Instagram, which is Dataphyte NG. And just a normal Google search, you can find us everywhere. And you can also reach us at either admin at dataphyte.com or partners at dataphyte.com for partnership and any kind of support. And we are very much open to any media organization in Nigeria to help them establish a data journalism platform and to even resource them with data and technological tools that can promote their work. So our doors are open and anyone can reach out to us on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joshua. And thank you so much, Onyi, for your time and your contributions as well. This has been a fun podcast. For our listeners, also remember to follow Step Up Nigeria on Instagram and Twitter at step_up_Nigeria and on Facebook at Step Up Nigeria. If you're also yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel as well. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Onyi.
Thank you so much for having me.